Well, we will start things off then. Hello, my
Mhm.
name is Gabriel. I am joined here today by Sébastien Bénard, founder of Deep Night Games and lead developer of Dead Cells, and now a full-time indie developer. We're here today to discuss Sebastian's latest project, which is Nuclear Blaze, submitted for Ludum Dare 48. Sebastien, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, thank you for inviting me also, and really nice to meet you.
Likewise. So, I guess we'll get started. How did you decide on what you're going to make for the jam?
Usually, it's a very chaotic process because, of course, you're in a rush, so you have to decide quickly, and you have to make sure that your first idea will be solid enough to actually make a game out of it. And the bad thing, it's something which becomes more and more complicated as you're gaining experience, because every time you try to push yourself harder, so you're always trying to make something like even crazier than the previous one, and it's not a good idea to do that, honestly. So for this one, I had some kind of a guide here because I wanted to make a game that would please also my first kid, which is 3 years old, and he likes a lot firefighters and trucks and stuff like that. So the general idea of making something related to a firefighter game in some way, because also you don't have many firefighter games. So it was a quite obvious idea at the beginning, but it was difficult to make something interesting, at least playable out of that.
Yeah, I see that you've been participating in Ludum Dare for the better part of a decade, since 2010, according to your About page.
Yeah, I think it's something as long as that. Most of my small games, some stuff I did outside of Motion Twin, most of them are jam game, and most of them are also Ludum Dare games. So I guess it's 10 years old or something.
Nice. So is Ludum Dare like a particular favorite of yours?
Yeah, it's like your first MMORPG or something. You have a special fondness for your first one, and Ludum Dare is special because it used to be a small thing, and now it's a very one of the most important jam. But it's also there is some special mood in this jam which I really like, and everybody is very positive, and you have lots of great feedback, and it's very useful when you're looking for ideas. Yes, it's a good jam.
Yeah, I completely agree. This was my first Ludum Dare, and I definitely got that same
Mm.
sense. So yeah, wonderful sense of community, and just yeah, lots of quality games being made. Especially, this one you've scored very highly, 25th overall.
Yeah,
Very yeah.
it was quite a surprise, honestly, because I was not very happy with the game when I released it, when I pushed the confirm button, because there was so many things I couldn't push into the game, but it was a really great surprise to actually have positive feedback on this one.
Excellent. Yeah, because to clarify, you actually participated in the competition as opposed to the jam, so you had just 48 hours to build everything that we're seeing here from scratch.
Exactly. That's the reason there is no sound in the game. I didn't have time.
Right. So am I correct in assuming that you used the level design toolkit to create this?
Yeah, definitely. It was also an opportunity for me to fireproof in very straightforward way the soft. So I'm making this on my side project, and I wanted to test it on something live, and when you don't have much time, like in a jam, it's a good test for this kind of tool.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's the whole point of the level design toolkit is for like quick and easy level design, and what better way to see if it's effective at creating those like quick projects than to be doing it in the context of a jam where you need to be creating things really quickly and
Exactly. Exactly.
all right. So what else? What other tools did you use in the process of creating the game?
It's mostly coding and level design, but also this jam was special for me because I used to only work with Photoshop, which was my main art tool, and because I was getting disappointed more and more with the Adobe, the way they are managing their project. I decided to give a serious try to Sprite, to the software Sprite, and because I really wanted to switch to something which was more intended for my kind of art, more pixel art and more animation oriented. And so I gave a try to Sprite, and it was really yes, amazing. Now it's definitely my main tool. I rewrote all my libraries to fully work and support Sprite. So most of the time it's VS Code and now Sprite and LDTK for the level design.
Okay, awesome. And so what was your actual process of like constructing the game? How did that start?
Usually it's a weird process in my head, honestly. I approach video games and making video games exactly just like I do play lots of tabletop RPGs, and that's something I really love to play with my friends. And when I am the game master, the guy which is creating the story and stuff like that. I always like to think of my project as a succession, a group of point of interest, like very strong moment that I imagine, like a very important scene, something like that. So every time I create something, usually I just imagine something at one specific moment I would really like to create in the game, and to see, okay, now how can I reach this moment? Or what is necessary to reach this specific moment? So for this game, it was actually I had two ideas at the beginning. I wanted to put the whole level on fire. I wanted to just to check if I was able to display as many FX and stuff to put the whole level on fire and to have something which was working. And the second thing, I wanted to have a door that explodes when you open it, like a backdraft fire, and because I thought it was cool. And I really wanted to check if I was able to do something convincing on that. So usually when I make a game, I work like that. I just try to figure out a very specific moment, something I really want to show to the player, and everything else is around that is how to reach this moment.
Nice. I think that's a really great way to go about it. Like you have a specific feeling or experience or emotion that you're trying to convey, and then you're
Exactly.
constructing an experience around it to convey that. Because I've seen like video footage of backdraft explosions on YouTube in slow motion, probably something by the slow-mo guys if you've seen their channel, and it's
Yeah,
terrifying just to see this explosive energy that could be behind any
exactly.
door.
And yeah, it's terrifying, and especially because they don't see pretty much anything. It's like when you see it from the video game perspective, it's obvious you see your surroundings. When I watch a lot of video, oops, I watch lots of videos when I made the game, and yes, something which is really common. It's just difficult to see anything, and you have to work slowly and to make sure that that's something that I didn't manage to convey in the game. Something the idea of being really careful and to progress slowly. But yes, it's super impressive to see what could happen just by opening a door or pushing a vent or something like that.
I mean, I would say that it's still like I'm still trying to approach things very carefully, if not necessarily slowly. Like I do get that sense of like trying to like find some safe ground and then set down, spray a bunch of water to clear my surroundings, and then
Mm.
move on from there. So I would say that well, I don't know. In your mind, how would you change things to get it better aligned with that idea?
One of the ideas at the beginning was to make sure that the beginning of the game would be like, okay, you can make progress, you can turn all fires off, and you can really clean a level. but I wanted to make sure that the second half of the game was more like everything is out of control, and you're just basically trying to exit the level without dying, and you cannot turn off the fire anymore. And that's something which was a little too frustrating to create quickly. So I gave up on this idea of at some point in the game making sure that you cannot fight the fire anymore. You just have to struggle, and something that was yes, a little bit too frustrating to create. But yes, on the extended version, I'm trying to lean forward to something more like this, to have some breakpoint where you are at one point in the game and you cannot you have to change your strategy and to give up on putting everything down and putting water everywhere.
Okay, and then the extended mode of the game, I also saw that you wanted to add a kid mode to the game so that it could be playable by your 3-year-old, who also recommended having a cool helicopter in the game.
Exactly.
I love that was the inspiration for this, and again, this is like super cinematic, and yeah, just in general, I think that it's neat to have a game about firefighters. Like as you said, for such a dramatic line of work, for something that's so like dangerous and life and death and heroic. I'm surprised that we don't see it featured more often in games.
Yeah, that's something which happens when you're making games, and that's something which happens from time to time. It's like you're thinking of an idea and you think like, okay, there are probably tons of games about that already, maybe more simulation-oriented games. Actually, this one is very specific maybe, but lots of people would like it. But actually, there was no real game about that. You have Mr. Rescue, which is a good collect game. It's an H.io game. You have also a very old game on Game Boy, the black and white one. But yeah, definitely you don't have many games about that. But I think I understand why, because it's a little bit repetitive to just have to put fires. You have to add something new to the mix to make it interesting on the long run. But yeah, that's something I would love to play in FPS, for example. Definitely to make like explore a building, and you know that every door or everything could collapse at any given time, something like that.
Yeah, I can imagine that working quite well, either like as you've done here in a 2-dimensional perspective or in a first-person perspective. Really like getting the feeling of fighting back against a fire. I remember making it to this screen before and losing against the fire. Like I didn't clear the room out very well, and then everything just caught up back on fire, and I was like, oh no.
Exactly, but that's something that I can't keep for the kid mode, because the idea of the kid mode is like designed for a 3-year-old kid, and it's the current game is just too stressful for a young kid. So I really wanted to just have you walking slowly, and you cannot die on fire, and you have to just put off small fires, something a little bit lighter, because of course I can't ask my kid to open a door and everything explodes and you die and burn, stuff like that. So that's the idea of the kid mode, something a little bit just about putting off fires with a cool guy.
All right. So, and then it's that and invincibility. And did you change anything about the actual nature of the platforming itself?
Yeah, actually I made a game a few months ago for my kid again, which was called Le Petit Tracteur Bleu, which is the small blue tractor, something like that. A car, I don't know the English word for that, tractor. It's a machine, a car that you use to in fields. And I made a game like that, and when I made it, actually it was very interesting to create, because when you are playing, when you are a gamer, when you actually played any game, you have some kind of a broad idea of what you should do, how do you climb on ladders, on platforms, stuff like that. And when you're putting a game in the hands of someone who actually really never saw a game in his whole life, actually you have lots of things that you have to make just a little bit more obvious or assisted in some way. And so yes, in this case, I would definitely probably not do the platforming part. Oh, not the platforming part, so you will just have to, the jump, for example, will be automatic. You probably won't have to push a specific key to climb ladders, it will be automated. So you will probably have to just make specific levels for this mode. And also the aiming will be automatic, so you just press to pull water, and it just throw water automatically towards the fire. Stuff like that. So the idea is really to just you just have to decide to go left or right and to throw water. Or you will probably have to turn fire off first on the platform.
Yeah.
So it's something really assisted, and it's really simple because you cannot ask for too much to a young kid.
Yeah, I've noticed that I've had like young kids try out my games before, and they have trouble with any platforming jump. They can move left and right, and they can jump, but where they get stuck is when they have to like jump and then move at a diagonal.
Yeah.
So
exactly. And my previous game, it's something that I struggled a lot with. And actually, when you are moving near a jump spot, that's something I marked in the level design. So the jump is actually automated, but the kid just feels like he's actually jumping where he expects. So, but even with that, I did. Oh,
Yeah.
this level is too big. That's a level that I split in two because it's really just too big. But yeah, that's something that even obvious things are actually much more difficult for someone who never played the game before.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a bit about the water and fire effects, because wow, they really stand out.
Thank you. Yeah, that's also not a good thing for me because I definitely spent too much time on my Ludum Dare weekend on just the fire effect. I knew it was like, when you're making a project, you have the idea of USP, unique selling point. And I knew that the fire thing was something which was a core component of the game. So I definitely had to spend some time on it. But I definitely spent, I think, half the weekend just tweaking the fire effect. Also, I had performance issues because, as I said, I wanted to put the whole level on fire. So I had to struggle with how to do that and stay at 60 FPS still. So yeah, but this one is very inspired by a fire effect I used in Dead Cells also. It's something, a similar technique that I'd used on the game. And I also spent lots of time just watching videos of fires and lots of firefighting videos. Just to the idea was how to make a fire effect without too much particles and without any kind of powder or stuff like that. A cheap one.
Yeah, I'm surprised that you consider this to be a cheap effect, because it looks like there's a lot of overlapping particles. Is that just a sort of trick of like additive blending and transparency?
Yes, pretty much just that. It's just a bunch of additive particles. The idea is that a single fire is like a single flame particle, and I put like 3 or 4 per fire, something like that, not too much. And everything else is it's in the details. It's like the small dots of light, like the sparks which are jumping out of the fire, and the smoke also behind, which adds a little bit of contrast, which actually makes the job of making you feel like the fire is bright, which isn't, but it's bright because it's dark behind. When you have a fire, you have a black mask of smoke behind. And this smoke, which is the white smoke, which stays when you have put off a fire, just to remind you that this place was on fire before. But it's really just a matter of trying to figure out exactly how to represent a fire without spending too much budget on making the actual fire, because the fire effect is a complicated thing, and you could make something really complicated, and but it would suck all your budget just for a single fire if you wanted to make it perfect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to figure out how to make it cheap.
Yeah, I think that it's really that fine line between getting something that accurately represents it the way that you want it to be, and then acknowledging that you could really just spend forever trying to get it to look perfect, and then even if you do spend all that time on it, then it's not performant. And we've actually got a question here in chat. Is your son an influence on the theme of your game? Here, Fireman, for me, it's the case. I'm doing a game on dinosaurs because of my son.
Yeah, definitely. When I used to make game jam before having kids, it was mostly the idea of making something that I don't do on my day job, on my at my previous job at Motion Twin on Dead Cells and stuff like that. So my idea before was to make something different or to learn something new. And now it's a little bit of a mix between doing an experimentation still, but also making something that my kid could play at one point. Maybe not right now, but something that I know I can show to my kids at some point. So yeah, on this one, the firefighting idea was something, and also, as I said before, it's something when I actually discovered that you didn't have many firefighting games. It was something of a challenge to me to think, okay, how can you make such a game which would still be interesting, and why actually there is no game? Maybe there is an issue that I didn't notice something. So yeah, so my kid, yes, definitely on this one was a very strong part of the idea, just to make it something that would appeal to him.
Yeah, excellent. I can just imagine like how being a parent changes your entire outlook on the art that you create. So because they become like the most important member of your audience, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's difficult because at the same time, I am working on an extended version of the game right now. And the extended version actually it's much darker than this version. So there is a story, a kind of storyline on this one. And if you know the SCP Universe, the SCP Foundation Universe,
Yeah,
something
vaguely.
which is a little bit, and it's a little bit dark. So it's a story about that. But that's why I decided to make a separate kid mode, because I still wanted to have a playable game for my kid, but still also wanted to tell a story, because there is I feel there is some kind of tension in the game that could be used a little bit more to make something a little bit stronger. So yes, it's really just trying to strike a balance between making a game for them and still also still making something a little bit adult oriented and still darker.
Yeah, because with the game's naming of like nuclear blaze, the first thing I thought of was the firefighters of in the Chernobyl disaster.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
it's really this like they are heroes who saved, you know, like things could have been so much worse if they hadn't gone in to fight the fires, and yet all of those people, I'm sure, must have suffered like terrible radiation sickness, and I don't know the whole story of it because it's just kind of sickening to think about. But
yeah.
So was that part of the inspiration behind the theming of like not just being a firefighter, but like in the context of a nuclear power plant?
Exactly. I tried to stick to the theme, which was deeper and deeper, because my first idea was to make yes, at first it's just small fires and pretty much okay. But as you are unveiling the story a little bit more, you are actually understand that you are exploring a place which is a little bit more dangerous than you expected. And definitely the Chernobyl shows, I think it's HBO or something like that, or OCS maybe. The Chernobyl show was definitely a very important inspiration for the game, but that's the part of the game I didn't have time to actually really implement. So it's just a suggested, a vague idea. So it's not really in the game, and something I'm working a little bit more on the extended version, just to stick to the original idea a little bit more.
Okay, and then the extended version that you've mentioned, is that going to be a commercial project? How do you envision releasing that?
For now, I think I will make it a commercial, but a very small project. I really just want to make a very short game. Actually, the current iteration of the game has like 20 levels. The new version has about 20 levels. So, but I plan to make it much shorter because I really want to have a compelling story and a compelling build-up, something which is a little bit more tense. So I think it fits a little bit more shorter experience. And I don't want the player to feel bored at some point, so shorter is better in this case. And yes, it will be a commercial project, probably first on itch.io, but maybe I will just make a small game on Steam too. Not sure yet. It really depends on what it will look like in the end.
Okay, yeah, I totally know what you mean about like taking a game project and you don't want to remove or diminish the experience by drawing it out too long. So it would be
exactly
you're going to end up with a better game by making it shorter. I think that a lot of people get stuck in the way of thinking that longer is better, bigger is better, but yeah, I think you can absolutely construct a stronger, more tightly focused experience if you just focus on making something that is just sort of finds its own length, doesn't feel too long.
That's exactly that. When I work on like this game, which is a little bit emotion oriented and less gameplay oriented, when I work on such a game, usually my idea is to make sure that the goal is not to make like a long experience. My goal is really to make an experience that you remember. And in this case, yes, you just have to. It's just like I suppose making a movie or a show. If you remove all the secondary things and stuff that actually slow down the experience and slow down the story, stuff like that, you actually make something much more intense and much more memorable, I think. It's just like the Chernobyl show. It's a very short one, but then when you end the show and you leave it, it's like, whoa, what was that? Actually, it was very short, but really intense.
Yeah, I think, and you see it in even like in comedy, like when I think people were releasing comedy shorts on Vine, and these are really funny, and then they transitioned over to YouTube where suddenly they had even like a full minute to make their video, and it just wasn't as funny because it was drawn out. Like 6 seconds of funny doesn't work in a minute-long video, so really every medium can stand to have this idea of sometimes shorter is better, and it's better to have like ending on some sort of emotional punch that leaves a memorable experience in the audience's mind.
Exactly.
But yeah, so talking about the Game Jam project itself, was there any particularly clever hack or shortcut that you used to get the Jam project finished that you wouldn't necessarily use in a production project?
Yeah, in this case, it's really all about the fire effect because the way I implemented it, it was really fully dedicated to the idea of putting the whole level on fire, and so there is also a bunch of things that became impossible because of that. But that's still something I'm trying to fix now on the extended version. The most important one, for example, it's super complicated to modify the level, actually, like breaking a wall or stuff like that, because of the way I actually optimized the fire spreading mechanic. But that's something I'm trying to fix now because I really wanted to have collapsing ceilings and stuff exploding and ideas like that. But yeah, usually when you're making a jam, it's really just about that you have an objective, and in a normal game, I would not do choices that I made for this game. But the idea of this one was just you are a firefighter, you have fires, and that's it. You don't have any kind of enemies, and you don't have much platforming. And these days, I don't remember exactly. Oh yes, maybe yes. The worst hack was probably the water. The way I handle the water, which is like a stupid way, because it's pretty inefficient as fuck. And in this version, every time you press the watering button, I actually throw a single bullet of water, which is pretty much always like a drop of water, and every drop of water is a bullet. So you have hundreds of bullets every time you press the button, which is super efficient when you want to detect. When you want to detect exactly where the bullet lands. But it's super inefficient when you plan to have like anything else than water on screen, because it dries the particle budget a lot when you're using it. So yeah, definitely it's not. If I had to do it again, I would probably have tried to make something a little bit more clever, like detecting the area which is covered and just make the water effect slightly differently to be a little bit cheaper in terms of budget. But yeah, not something I would do on a big project, definitely.
Right. So is that something that you're correcting for the release version, or is that something it's fine for the sake of this project because it already works, so you don't need to go in and fix it?
I spent a few days, yes, just re-optimizing the way I make water in the extended version, because it was taking half the budget of the particles and FX and stuff and FPS. So yes, I spent a few days just to fix that, because it was a bad low-level decision at the beginning of the project, and it was okay for the jam, but yes, it led to some difficulties on the extended. So, but you know that's. If you remove something somewhere, you probably add something somewhere else.
Yeah.
And in my case, when I removed and optimized the water effect, I actually lost all my budget on the sailing, falling, and wall breakings, because they took a lot of particle also to have this idea of falling stones and dust and stuff like that.
All right. That is about everything that I had in terms of questions to ask, but is there anything else that you wanted to relay about the project? Any trivia or just details that you would want people to know about?
Yeah, maybe you can talk about this SCP thing. That's something I really discovered really recently. You know, the whole SCP Universe. If for people who don't know about that, you know, the SCP Universe is like a collaborative science fiction stuff that people built together without formally deciding to build it together. It's like a huge inspiration, and so it's like the X-Files at a power of 11. You know, something which it's deep as CS, and it's really a vast thing, and it's really interesting because when you're interested into strange or anomalies or Stalker universe or Chernobyl things, every themes which is related to that. It's a very, very inspiring thing, and yeah, it's a very, very good for someone who is seeking for ideas. So that's something I discovered really recently and was like amazed by how deep the rabbit hole was going. So like a huge thing.
Okay, excellent. And we do have a couple questions coming in from the chat here. So, Nesume is asking about any hacks, pitfalls. So HAXE, that's the game development engine that you used?
That's the language, yes.
The language, yes, that's what I meant. Yeah, so if you encountered any pitfalls while you're developing with hacks.
Axe is a very specific thing because it's a language that we developed a few years ago, and it used to be a motion twin language, but it actually became something a little bit actually much larger than that. And it's just to introduce really quickly, it's just a cross-platform language, which is like it looks like Java or JS or C++ type language. But it's very the language itself is very easy and yet really powerful and very safe for the developer. You avoid lots of error when you're writing in Axe because the compiler takes care of lots of things, especially typing and memory and stuff like that. So in itself, the language is really great to make application on games, and it was really designed with that in mind. It's really inspired by the Flash API and things like that. It's really made to create things quickly and still have a safe coding environment. But the big problem with Axe is that if you don't know Axe, it's not a good idea to make an Axe game because the documentation is lacking, and that's something that we are still struggling. So if you have experience with Axe, it's a great tool, but if you don't, it's a difficult start point to actually use it. So that's a powerful tool, but with lots of downfalls, especially on that. If you want to learn it, it's a little bit more difficult.
Okay, so yeah, it's got some trade-offs, some obvious benefits
Exactly.
if you know what you're doing, and then it's just the building up that familiarity in the first place that is you got to have that initial investment of time and effort.
Exactly that. That's something. It's it's easy to use. It's easy to get started to basic things, and you have controls on pretty much everything because even the engine itself is written in Axe, so you have full controls on everything. But when you're looking for specific questions, it could be a little bit more difficult to just get an example of something working. That's something I'm working a lot with because all my Jam games are open source, and I always use the same code base, which is called game base, which is like a very minimal set of stuff which allows you to make a game quickly. So if you want to get started in Axe, usually and most people recommend to go to use the game base stuff or Flixel or game base. You have different ways to do that. Because it's really designed to just give you the core principles and core stuff working, so you can actually make your game a little bit more quickly. Yeah, this one. And I'm working on the version 2 because this one used to be a little bit too minimalist, and they extended the new version, which will be live. It's available on a branch, but the extended version is a little bit more feature complete, so you actually have everything you need. You can just use as sprite files, and you can import LDTK levels or tide or things like that just to get started quickly. And if you want to have control, that's a nice approach because, as I said, everything is open source, so you can modify everything you want.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's see. There's a couple other questions here. One coming in from Nishume about the possibility of an iOS version.
I don't know exactly if I make a mobile version, will probably just be an HTML5 based version because it works nicely. My main issue is about controls because I think it's not the best to have a virtual stick. I'm not a big fan of that. So if I make a mobile game out of this one, I would probably try to figure a way to have more intuitive controls, something which is like more like you touch where you want to go or stuff like that. Because I think it's yes, usually you have to adapt to your device. That's the idea. So it's definitely possible to make a mobile version. Right now, the version actually, if you open the game on iOS, it will just work, but you won't have controls working because it's a JavaScript game, so it will just work directly. But I'm not sure. It will really depend on how the final extended version goes. So maybe.
Right.
It's definitely possible.
Yeah, so it would be a question of building out the game and seeing how much of an audience there is for it, and then if it's worthwhile to put in the effort to develop the native control scheme for the iOS version or like mobile in general, then that's a possibility.
Exactly.
Okay, and then there's another question here from Nishume, which is LDTK custom version or the open source version? So I guess the version that you use to create Nuclear Blaze, is it a modified branch or is it the regular open source?
That's the regular version. Actually, LDTK, the idea is to make it like a completely open source project. I have no plan on short term to make some dedicated version or fully paid version. The idea is it's more like it's a tool designed for me at first. Because I need for my next larger project, I really need a good level design tool. So I decided to make my own. But the idea is to also integrate ideas on things that people would need. Because when you're making 2D levels, you actually have today you have 3 choices, which are Tide, Ogmo, and now LDTK, which are the 3 apps. And every single app has its specificities on pro and cons. But for me, I'm really fond of having something which has a good UX, something which is actually pleasant to use. And for example, Tide is super powerful. It's definitely the best out there, but the UI is a little bit more difficult, and I didn't have much patience with that. So that's why I decided to make LDTK something like a big focus on making it easy to use, and after maybe one day powerful. But yeah, so that's the main version. I use exactly the same version as the one available to everyone. And it's a pay what you want application. So if you want to get it for free, so it's totally okay, and that's the idea.
No, I think that's great to be like, and it's something that I strive to do in my own development career as well, is to develop tools that both I use and that other people can use, and that these are tools that you're using yourself, but that you're like you're giving back to the game development community, and I think that's very admirable. And yeah, I guess
exactly.
I don't really
that's
have
exactly
much
that. But I totally agree with that because we live. I think we both live, and many people like us actually grown up in a world where you could learn from just grabbing open source project. You could learn by watching YouTube videos and tutorials, and we live in a world where many people actually gave us a lot, like really a lot of their time to just teach something, and it was like free most of the time. Like they didn't ask for any money or anything like that. So yeah, at some point, I think it's natural to feel like you have to give back something. You have to make something that people would actually enjoy or learn from, and that's already the whole idea. That's why when I make a tool, just the one you're looking at, which is a tabletop RPG oriented, I prefer the idea of making something which is free and pay what you want, because it's some people just can't afford, so that's pretty okay. That's normal. And if people actually like it, they can pay if they want, and they can pay as much as they want. And it's a very free-to-play oriented. That's something I made before a lot. So that's the idea of, okay, if you want to invest, you can do that.
Yeah, I think that there's not much more I can say than that's very noble of you, and I think it's really great to make these tools available for everyone, and I just hope that you are in fact getting the support that you deserve for putting all this out there.
Yeah, definitely. That's something I'm actually I would like to do. I want to do that properly, but I would like to communicate a little bit more on the figures, on exactly how much money I get from that, because that's something which I don't think will be hidden in any way, because that's not super useful to hide this kind of thing. And especially when you're making video games, we can talk a lot about Steam Spy and ways for game developers to actually get interesting data from existing games, because they just want to figure out, does it work, does it not work. And and in my case, yes, this project actually are paying the bills, so which is exactly what I wanted. I don't want more about that. I want to get money from video games first. Then from the tool side, my idea was just to make it just to pay the bill, which is okay, because it's also my tool, so something that I will use anyway. So if it can pay just my desk and everything like that, that's really okay. And in this case, that's precisely the case. So just pay the bills, which is good.
Excellent. Well, I'm very glad to hear that, and I don't want to be taking up too much of your time here, but we did get one last question here from Grey Ninja 19. Sure. How is it that you started using the Hacks game language, and is there a story behind it?
Actually, the Axe language used to be something different before. As I said, that's the language we actually created when we were at Motion Twin. That's a friend of mine who designed the compiler and the general language idea. Actually, the language has a small backstory because it was maybe 10 years ago, something like that, when we were making Flash games and web games. And when you were making web games, it was a kind of a nightmare to make web games because it was complicated. You had to learn CSS, HTML, of course, but you had to learn PHP, you have to learn JavaScript, you had to learn ActionScript, and a few exotic things, or even C++ to make a server. Just to make a single web game, you actually have to use lots of different technologies, and of course, they don't get along together that much. So the idea at this time was to make a language to unify a little bit more all this stuff. Because yes, it was really just the idea of making our own job a little bit easier because of this lack of unification. So Axe was created on this idea. So the good thing for me is that because I was there in the team, I also learned Axe along making it with my colleagues. So it was quite easy to learn because we designed every time we had something was added in the language by Nicola, the designer of the compiler. I was there also to learn these new tools. So that's also my comfort zone to stay with Axe because I pretty much know every small details in it and why they are there and why it works like this. But that's also because I used, like many people around there, I use different languages, and Axe for me still was one of the most comfortable to use, even if you have modern things like Python, Ruby, or very new ideas. But Axe is still like a solid, does everything language for me.
All right. Nice. Well, I think that's about all the questions that we've got coming in. I think we'll start to wrap things up there, but where can people find you, and are there any projects of yours that you want to call attention to?
You actually can just visit my website, which is deepnight.net. The Deepnight Games website, which used to be mine on site, and now is the corporate one. And apart from that, most of the time I mostly communicate on Twitter, and I try to keep things. I don't speak too much on Twitter because I just to make sure that if I say something that is because it's actually interesting for my followers, I'm not into public debate or stuff like that, especially. So yeah, if you want to follow me, that's the best two things to follow. And if you're into coding, GitHub, because you have most of my projects are open source, so you can just get there.
All right. Well, as you've been mentioning them, I've been dropping all the links in chat, and I think we're going to wrap things up there. But Sébastien, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for joining me here today. This was a fantastic conversation.
Thank you. It's very nice from you again, and it was very interesting. So thank you.
All right, and enjoy. I believe it is afternoon for you, so enjoy your evening, and best of luck on your post-jam version of Nuclear Blaze and all your projects in the future.